January 25th, 2025 meeting of the Development Review Board to order. I have a few opening remarks to make. Here at the DRB, we hear applications for land development in the town of Brattleboro and appeals of zoning administrator decisions. Procedurally, the Development Review Board operates on the record. Broadly, this means that we take a clear record of testimony from the applicant and any interested parties, and then issue a written decision with our findings. Applicants and members of the public should be aware that as we are on the record, this is your opportunity to comment on and provide evidence relating to an application. Application materials and written testimony is posted on the town website as received. Hearings may be continued at the board's discretion if materially important documents are received after the submission deadline. In the event our decision is appealed to the environmental court, the court will not take or consider additional testimony at its hearing, but will look to the evidence from our hearings, the regulations, and determine if the evidence supports the findings and decisions of the board. Only interested persons that participate in this proceeding may appeal a decision made by the board, so I strongly encourage all of you to speak up at this hearing. As we are on the record, we are going to ask if you affirm that your testimony will be truthful. So applicants and anyone wishing to speak to an application, please affirm the following. I hereby affirm that the evidence I give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under pains and penalties of perjury. Please say I do.
I do.
Online people?
I do.
We had people join just now, so you might need to start them.
You may not, we will not take your testimony if you do not affirm and take the oath.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Applicants require a majority vote of the full board to proceed. That is 4 votes out of 7. We do have a full board tonight, so I don't think that will be a problem. After taking testimony, the board will consider the public hearing and may vote on your application. The board will issue a written decision within 45 days of the close of the hearing. While we may vote on an application, it is the written decision that governs a timeline for appeal. It should be noted that the town of Brattleboro is a party with an interest in land development applications. The town does not have a special status before the board. Documents provided to the board by the town planning department, town attorney, or other town departments will be considered in exactly the same way as information from the applicant or other interested parties. So I'd like to have a approval of the December 18th minutes.
Can I make a motion? To approve?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Brian, has the meeting been properly warned?
Yes, it has.
Good. Anyone have any conflict of interest or ex parte communication? Okay, so I just want you to, in the audience here tonight, we have quite a bit of crowd we're not used to having. The way this will work is the applicants will present their application, and then the board will get a chance to question and comment, and then we will open up the floor to the other interested parties. Okay. You guys want to state your name and tell us about your project?
All right, thank you. My name is John Hoover, and I'm Assistant Executive Director of Groundworks Collaborative. Groundworks is here today to seek a permit for the construction of a new community facility at 81 Royal Road that will serve up to 40 adult individuals experiencing homelessness. The 2-story building will include office space, a kitchen and living area on the first floor, and bedrooms with bathrooms and laundry facilities on the second floor. Site improvements include a parking area with an access drive from Royal Road, a patio area, and landscaping. Groundworks Collaborative's mission is to work with people and systems creating solutions to end hunger and homelessness for all people in our region. We envision a community in which everyone has their basic needs met, including a safe and dignified place to call home. Groundworks Collaborative and its predecessor organization, Morningside Shelter, have operated a homeless shelter at 81 Royal Road since 1979. This new construction will provide a modern and designed-to-purpose shelter informed by our experience and best practices in shelter design. Groundworks provides a continuum of services to help people meet their basic needs. This includes outreach to unsheltered individuals, an emergency shelter on South Main Street, and supportive services for formerly homeless households now living in the community. In addition, we operate Southeastern Vermont's largest food shelf. On South Main Street, we operate an emergency shelter that is considered a lower barrier shelter, meaning we have few barriers to entry so we can provide life-saving emergency shelter to those who need it most urgently. While admission criteria are minimal, we maintain clear conduct policies that residents must follow to remain in the program. What our community currently lacks is both sufficient shelter capacity and a higher barrier shelter option. The programmatic mission at 81 Royal Road is to provide shelter and housing navigation services to individuals who can meet more stringent expectations. We will offer the shelter to individuals with whom we have established relationships and who have demonstrated they can succeed in a program requiring intensive engagement with housing case management services. Safety is paramount. All potential clients will undergo criminal background checks, and we maintain strict substance use prohibitions. I think it would be helpful to define what the program is not. As explained above, it is not a low barrier shelter. It's also not permanent housing. Permanent housing entails a landlord and tenant relationship governed by a lease and Vermont rental law. In this program, operating as a shelter, we have full control over occupancy. During last January's point-in-time count, a statewide census of every person who was homeless on a single night that month, 452 community members in Windham County were counted as homeless. Sadly, we have no reason to expect any improvement on that amount as we prepare for this year's count. As we sit here tonight, we can expect there are somewhere between 50 to 80 people sleeping unsheltered in town. The need for shelter is tremendous, and these 40 beds are an important part of addressing this crisis. Last March, and again this week, we conducted meetings open to all of the residents of Morningside condos, which abuts 81 Royal Road. I genuinely thank them for their time they've given and their input. Their contributions have supported us in developing a design that we hope will constitute an improvement to a property in our shared neighborhood. Moreover, their thoughtful questions and input on our program operations, I believe, will support us in success in operating this shelter. I'd like to introduce and thank for joining this meeting in the audience, Peter Elwell, Groundworks Collaborative's Board Chair, Libby Bennett, our Executive Director, and I'd also like to note that Pete Van Oot, our attorney, is joining us via Zoom and is available to answer any questions. Lastly, I'd like to now introduce this project's architect, Sam Beal of Duncan Wisniewski Architecture, our civil engineers, Andrew Rodriguez and Julie Cornell from MSK, and our landscape architect, Paul Simon from Park Architecture, who is joining us over Zoom. They will now take a few minutes to tell you more about the building and site we've designed.
All right, first I'm going to start off with site design. This will be a little bit repetitive, and I'm sure it's gone through the application. The proposed development is in a residential neighborhood. It is RN 54 zoning district, and has historically been used as a residential facility for temporary housing. The use of this property will not change with this proposed project. Site work will include demolition of the existing structures, construction of residential facility, and associated site improvements. The existing tree line will be maintained, and the proposed landscaping will minimize visual impact to the adjacent properties. It's kind of just the overview. And I'm going to address kind of specific things within the application, within the requirements, such as vehicle access and circulation. The proposed project will retain access from Royal Road with one two-way driveway. Parking. Parking standards for this zone would require 19 stalls based off the gross floor area. Currently, we have 21 stalls provided on the site. There is a deviation from standard in which there are 11 consecutive stalls along the southern property line. This was done for mostly constructability and aesthetic concerns. If you have, you would have to have a jog out, it would not be a square parking lot. Snow clearing and general constructability of the parking lot would be affected if we had kind of an odd shape. It would also look odd to not have a square parking lot. That being said, at the board's discretion, we can remove up to 2 parking spaces and still be in compliance with the requirements. We would eliminate one of the parking spaces from that 11, and you would be in full compliance. Our preference would be to leave that parking space, but it is up to you. We can talk about that. Pedestrian access and circulation. This site has historically been used as a temporary residential housing. There is currently no sidewalk along Royal Road, and we do not anticipate any significant changes in use or volume of traffic. Stormwater and snow storage. With the planned expansion, there will be an increase of an impervious area on the parcel of roughly 0.1 acres. And this would increase from 0.2 acres to 0.3 acres. Stormwater discharge patterns will alter based off the construction and the demolition of the adjoining buildings, but the overall drainage patterns will remain, and they will continue to drain to the swale to the south of the site. Roof runoff will be treated with designated drip edge areas and a rain garden, further increasing the treatment and thus offsetting some of the additional impervious. Snow storage has been indicated on the site plan. If you could pull that up, it's the blue area in the site plan. I believe it's also in your notes as well. But obviously that would be done during snow clearing opportunities. Just kind of more ticking things off the list. Renewable energy resources. We do not feel that this proposed development will have any adverse effect in accessing renewable energy sources. And finally, per town regulations, 87 square feet of signage is allowed. This facility will only be using, in total, 25 square feet of signage.
My name is Sam Beal. I'm a principal at Duck and Vishnesky Architecture, and previously to this, I designed the shelter at 54 South Main, as well as doing lots of work in Chittenden County with similar organizations that work with unhoused. And so this has been an important project for us, as well as the broader communities, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of vulnerable Vermonters. So to that end, I want to talk a little bit about the building. I want to leave time for questions and make sure that the audience has time to ask their questions. So I'll keep my comments brief. But Stephen, if you could bring up the rendering, I think that's probably the best way to see the building at this point. Zoom out a little bit. So we have a rather simple bar building here that's efficient and economical on the site, and that was purposeful because at this time, as you're probably well aware, construction costs continue to outpace inflation, and so as a consequence, we want to steward these public resources carefully and design an efficient building. So as such, we put a gable on this to acknowledge the residential character of the neighborhood. We oriented that narrower gable towards the street so that this building presents itself as modestly towards the public frontage. And then we added additional detail to make this building attractive and dignified for those who seek to use it. Primarily that's done with the trellis that you see that runs from the entrance to the building all the way to the rear. It's orange terracotta, if you will, along here. And we're going to be growing clematis vine along that. And that's a really strategic and purposeful part of the design to create that landscaped element that softens this structure and creates a welcoming entry to all who need to seek services here. We have a variety of siding patterns here, but primarily lap siding to reference the vernacular tradition that you see across Vermont. And as well as some cedar shingles at key moments around the entries where you touch the building. Internally, to John's point, the ground floor is primarily staff office space as well as gathering space for users, a kitchen, food storage. Below is a full basement with mechanical space and storage space, and upstairs, the windows that face the parking are where you see the bedrooms. The bar along the back has circulation, 2 stairs, and an elevator, as well as bathrooms for the users. In terms of the energy efficiency of the building, this is an all-electric building similar to our work at 54 South Main using air source heat pumps both for the HVAC and the domestic hot water. We will be following the 2024 CBs, which has set some pretty clear goals across the state of Vermont for energy use. We will exceed that code in terms of air tightness and seeking a passive house level of air tightness to ensure both that the users are comfortable, but also that we use as little energy as possible on site. Beyond that, we have sought to specify materials that have low embodied carbon. Just a small example, the previous shelter, we used a fiber cement lap siding, perfectly good material. Cement has a high embodied carbon, it takes a lot of energy to make cement. This project, we're planning to use a bio-based wood siding material that we think will bring in this project as a lower embodied carbon footprint. So seeking every way we can to make sure that this is a modern, efficient building that's both meets, Groundworks' programmatic needs, but also meets our broader societal needs to bring down the consumption of carbon. I just want to build a little bit on what John mentioned about meeting with the neighbors. On Friday, I had the opportunity to Zoom with John and a few neighbors from the neighborhood, and we talked a little bit about the site design. Can you bring up the photometry plan real quick, Stephen, please? As such, we had a good conversation out of a few things. We wanted to propose essentially 3 conditions of approval for the board to consider. The first one is related to site lighting. And I'll just keep speaking to it while we bring up that plan. But essentially, the site photometry plan illustrates what parts of the site are lit in the evening. And we identified a couple areas that were perhaps underlit. One being the side yard, which had no lighting previously in the application, as well as one area at the rear along the pathway. And so as such, we'd like to recommend the board consider a condition of approval that we add some additional site lighting both at the rear and the side yard in order to, I think if you keep going. It's the last page, I believe. Yeah, sorry. As a condition of approval that we add some additional site lighting at the rear and side yard, subject to staff approval. Sorry, this is the architectural part, so you gotta keep going up a little bit.
Yeah,
One more. Yeah, keep going. There it is. Oh, you went right past it. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. So it's going to be awfully hard for folks to see, but along the side yard there behind the building is, we don't have any wall packs currently shown there. And so I think by adding 3 discrete wall packs, wall connected site lighting, we can get that area lit to dissuade anyone from spending time there. Frankly, Groundworks staff is very motivated to ensure safety on this site just as much as the neighbors, and so we're welcome that input. And then in the back area between the patio and the seating zone, there's a little bit of area that's underlit, and so we think we can add an additional bollard in that location and bring up those light levels. If you go to the illustrated landscape plan, I think that would be the next best image to bring up, please. That's it. Thank you. So 2 other things came up during our discussion with the neighbors. One was a concern about people accessing the site from up the hill. We share that concern and welcome the condition of approval to add a fence along that back walkway. We would probably propose that be black chain link so that it kind of disappears into the wooded zone there. We don't want people accessing the site from the rear, and so to that end, an additional fence is a reasonable path path forward to limit that access. And lastly, there were some questions about the visibility of the parking lot from the road. We currently have a fence as well as one row of plantings along the street, Royal Road here. We'd like to propose that we add some additional landscape to that area to further buffer and limit the visibility of the parking lot from Royal Road. To build a little bit on Andrew's comments about the parking, part of the reason we proposed 21 spaces, in addition to the reasons Andrew mentioned, is that we really want this whole design to work best both for the users as well as the staff. And currently the South Main shelter has a parking lot that was as big as we could fit on that site. It's often oversubscribed. And so to that end, it can be a distraction from staff, managing the parking lot when they should be managing, or I should say, doing their core job, which is delivering services. And so to that end, I did not want to undersize this parking lot and create that same issue again. So I would encourage the board to consider approving the site plan as it is rather than asking us to reduce the parking. I think that it will be useful for the staff to not have to worry about the potential for a smaller parking lot than is truly needed. So to that end, I'd like to finish my remarks and thank you for your time and see if there's any questions you have about our application.
I'll go first.
Go ahead, Tom.
The issue in our land use regs with the 11 parking spaces in a row isn't necessarily the number, just as a number, but it's that it needs to be broken up.
Yes.
You caught that? Okay.
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. I have a whole bunch of questions. I'll let others go, but this is a clarification. If you're proposing a fence in the back, is that like going to then loop around on the sides as well? Or if it ends?
Yes, there's an existing fence that runs along adjacent to the abutter, and we would connect up with that fence and probably bring it all the way to the proposed dog fenced-in area, so as to basically neck that down. We can't prevent someone from coming from the tennis parking lot, or not parking lot, the tennis courts just off the page there. But so we're not going to build a perimeter fence, but I think if we can prevent someone coming in from a place where staff won't have eyes, that's a reasonable path.
I've actually thought for connectivity and the way the geography is, and there not being sidewalks currently on Vernon Road,
Yes.
that actually going up through the woods to South Main actually would be really convenient. But if neighbors and people have voiced concerns, then that's something to consider.
We did hear those concerns, yes.
Yeah. I have others, but alternate.
I'll ask a question. Seeing as we're talking fences, you have on this site details map a typical screen fence detail. But I'm looking on the maps, I've yet to see anywhere that you're calling out a screen fence on this 8 foot wide, 8 foot tall wooden screen fence.
I believe that was probably incorporated. It might be, without looking at the specific detail that you're looking at, it could be for the dumpster enclosure.
For the what?
Dumpster enclosure, to screen off the dumpster enclosure.
No, the dumpster enclosure has a different one over here that was
Paul, is that
refuse
something you could-
enclosure.
Is that something that shows up in your drawings, Paul?
I don't believe we called for a screen fence anywhere. We
And there's a
do.
detail here, and I was looking, and I'm not going to find it anywhere.
Is it on civil plan or landscape?
It's on the
It's ours.
Plan C502 site details.
Okay, so I think that would probably just be an added detail if it would be added. I don't think we have it prescribed necessarily on the site, other than the only screen fence that we would
So
have
is
is
this-
on.
Sorry,
This
standard
was
detail
This was
you
just
can
trying to
ignore.
throw me off, huh?
No.
Is there a fence here in front of these?
No, those
That's the split
are
That's a
split
split
rails.
rail fence on the
Split rails on the front. So, that being said, you also called out An 8 by 12 foot shade and smoking structure in
Yes.
one place, and then a 8 by 12 foot shade structure. And you refer to a C detail, and I can't find that anywhere.
So I believe that was going to, it was kind of at the, the construction budget allowed, but that would be a prefabricated structure, which if selected, we would go with a prefab.
So the detail, I couldn't find a detail
Yeah.
on any of the drawings that would give.
Okay. We can provide that.
Yeah, we have a placeholder for detail for that. It's not required for permitting to show the structure, I think, but we can, I have a detail for that. It's a standard polygon structure.
Maybe you could replace the typical screening fence detail with that one.
Fair.
Thank you. Go ahead, you said you have plenty
I
of
do.
questions, so
Um,
go ahead.
the building is gonna be 40 feet exactly from the front line? Did I understand that correctly?
I'd have to look at the plans to know exactly. I think we adjusted it slightly recently. Paul, do you have that in front of you, what the setback is, or maybe you have it?
Yeah, grab it right now.
Setback of what now? I didn't hear that.
From the street to the front of the building.
I can pull up the setback
No.
line is.
No,
the-
the setback is 40 feet, but the building is actually a little bit
Yeah.
back from the
Yeah,
setback.
we're well within the setback, well outside of the setback.
Yeah, and the setback line is shown on that plan that you have up right now, so you can see it very lightly there, and that the building footprint is beyond that.
I think
So did you have a question about the
Yeah,
setback?
I think you're supposed to be within the minimum to maximum setback. Because the minimum setback's 10 feet, the maximum setback's 40.
I read that as in you. I believe that the maximum setback, that was a minimum setback we would not be in, but if that being said, we can adjust and put that building within that 40-foot setback. We were trying to stay away from the road and, increase screening from the rest of the road.
Brian, what is your understanding of the front yard setback requirements?
Yeah, it is maximum of 40 feet.
Okay.
The exception would be if there was some extreme topography, but that doesn't really apply in this site.
Okay, so the fact that we're, let's call it 45 feet from the street, we're out of compliance in that regards?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, I don't see a reason in the site plan why we can't adjust the building to be 5 feet closer to the street. Frankly, we were closer, and we recently shrank the building in order to get back on budget. And so as we pulled it back, it took us out of compliance. So we can adjust that footprint forward. And if you want to recommend that as a condition of approval, I welcome that.
Did you guys do the math about how many, what's it called, square feet of driveway or pavement are in the front setback?
Or we did not specifically calculate that. We're, as far as driveway, we were matching the existing kind of conditions that were there.
Because there was something about 300 square feet being the maximum limit, correct? I don't have the regs and everything memorized, and I wasn't prepared to have it quoted, but that's all that I know, so something to look at. I could find the reg and come back to this.
I'm just looking at the Brian's staff report to see if that was brought up. The truth is we have a parking lot that we need to access, and we need a reasonable driveway to access it. So I'm not sure that there's much we can do
Yeah, I wouldn't.
beyond what's there.
I don't think we could we couldn't necessarily narrow that driveway, or else we would not satisfy two-way traffic.
I just pulled the CAD plan up, and I can calculate the drive square foot area while you all talk about other items, I guess, at this point. So I
Thanks,
can
Paul.
let you know what it is in a minute.
Okay.
I've got another question. We'll take
Go ahead.
turns.
Go ahead, yeah.
You mentioned that you were wanted to maintain the tree line. And from the existing conditions drawing, it looks to me, from what I can see here, that you're removing 24 trees and letting 5 stay of the existing trees.
Yes, that's correct. And so we do have removal of some trees slated, but I think what Andrew is referencing is that we're trying to maintain the tree line along the perimeter, as well as adding the required buffer.
Well, you're taking all the trees that are on the property, on the perimeter out.
But we're maintaining the trees that are on the other side of the property line, as well as the trees along the rear.
The ones that are off the property, on somebody else's land.
Correct, which is part of the existing tree line.
Oh, okay.
We need to remove certain amounts of vegetation in order to construct the site plan, but we're also required to add the vegetated buffer, as you see. One thing I didn't mention, but on the planting plan, Paul has helpfully put a square around every plant that's required by the ordinance, as opposed to others that are more at our discretion as part of the design. And so that's something that you can refer to in terms of what is and is not required.
Okay, the area between the 40-foot setback line and the property line in front on Royal Road is just over 800 square feet.
Just to jump in, the wording on that provision is a little bit vague. On A, it says no more than 300 square feet of land within the front yard setback. And then below that, it's elaborated that the remainder of the minimum front yard setback must be maintained or established as lawn or landscaping. So in one, it talks about the minimum front yard setback. In the other, it doesn't say whether it's the minimum or maximum front yard setback. You know, obviously, keeping it to 300 square feet if you're having a 40-foot setback isn't
Right.
plausible.
Yeah,
So I think it's poor draftsmanship.
I agree.
Up until 10 feet, I think it's compliant.
Yeah. So at 10 feet, it would be compliant.
Oh, from the property line to 10 feet?
Yeah, the minimum
Oh, I see.
front yard setback, it would be compliant.
More questions, guys? Anybody? Catherine, do you have questions?
No, this time.
I have. Do you want to go?
It's gonna be a fireproof building of sprinklers?
Yes, so this will have a full fire protection system, sprinkler system as part of the plans. And I didn't mention it in my remarks, I apologize, but it has an elevator, so the whole building is fully accessible.
I'm gonna ask about the actual operation of the place, just one quick question. Are there actually any agreements or leases of any type that the temporary residents will sign?
I wouldn't call it a lease, but on intake into the program, we review set of policies, what our expectations are, what constitutes kind of our conduct standards, so that just to kind of cover the top level, that would include engagement with case management services. It's a program that doesn't allow substance use, so notifying people of that, and whatever else ends up being germane, like perhaps like we do tours amongst the residents, and we're going to ask you as long as you're able to sign up for one of those and that kind of thing. So there would be an agreement of sorts in that respect, but I'd say it's not a lease because for one, there's no money paid by people to stay there. Simply program expectations.
Do short-term emergency shelters have similar agreements throughout the state?
Our
As the one you
our
described?
shelter on South Main Street has I would say something similar to that for people to stay.
Something similar?
Yeah.
You actually brings up an interesting point. You had mentioned that I thought I heard that you said that that the people that were coming, that you were going to did a criminal background check.
That's our intention.
And what do you do with that information once you check?
Yeah, we would apply it against a policy for criteria for who can stay there. I mean, I can say off the top of my head, we haven't written this policy yet, but we would exclude registered sex offenders. We would exclude people with recent violent crime convictions. And if they don't satisfy that, then we wouldn't be offering shelter to them in that program.
So it's sort of guidance for you rather than, I mean, is it I don't know. I was looking through I got the impression from, maybe I'm way off base, that this was what was always kind of known as a dry shelter.
That's our intention for how we want to operate it. And I'll say, because someone in the audience keeps saying intention, let me correct myself. That is our plan for how we're going to operate it.
Well, and that brings to, I mean, there was an email that we got circulated from that Brian had asked some questions about that, and I guess my concern on that is there's an awful lot of it doesn't seem as if you're working at a hard and fast rule here. There seems as if there's in the second paragraph it starts off in theory, and then it goes into in general, and this is what we're seeking to do, with no intention of doing this, but it doesn't sound as if it. I'm wondering if this might consider to be a change from being a dry shelter if you have Brian had asked a few questions about what drug use and such, and whether people would be kicked out right away, and from what I read here, it was kind of like, well, maybe. That's
Brian,
what
did you want to add anything before I answer?
Yeah, so the purpose of that exchange is I had received a question from the public whether this in fact was going to be a drug recovery facility. And that's defined in statute by a two-part test, and one of them is that it's registered as such by the state. And that email exchange makes it clear that you are in fact not going to be seeking registration from the state and are not going to be offering recovery services. So this is an emergency shelter, which is a use. A drug recovery residence is a separate use under state law. And if it were to change from an emergency shelter to a residential recovery center, that would be a change of use, and they would have to come back here and receive approval. And the second part is that there's a limitation on what local boards can review for certain uses, and those are community structures, religious institutions, and also emergency shelters and some others as well. And you can't actually review how those are run. You can't.
Oh, no, I was just wondering, I guess that would be the question, is whether if you were thinking about this, is whether this might constitute a change of use or not.
If they in fact did start offering those services and registered as a residential recovery, yes, it would be a change of use, and they'd have to return to the board. And as far as the limitation on your review powers, I just want to make sure everybody understands that we're not talking about how this is run. We're talking about site plan elements. And we're limited to that because that's what state statute says we're limited to.
Yeah.
That said, I'm happy to answer your question.
Yeah.
I apologize if anything I wrote ended up sounding weaselly or that we're not committing. We're a year and a half, in theory, off from opening it. The program design has happened. It is both our intention and our full, what's a better word than intention? What we are committing to do is to operate a high barrier shelter there.
What would be considered a
Dry shelter.
similar to what was
Yes.
there before, dry
Yeah,
shelter.
and I'm sorry if my word choice suggested that we were not trying to say that or give us a opportunity to change when opening. It's just simply how I wrote, and I'm sorry to have given anybody that impression otherwise.
Okay, moving on. Do you have other site kind of questions?
Site-
Go ahead.
Can you elaborate on the demolition of the existing building? Is it just going to go to the dump? Is there any salvage happening?
No, not exactly, sorry.
Commercial.
Well, salvage works is gonna come through and make sure that anything that can be repurposed will be repurposed. Once anything that's salvageable we'll pull out. The building will be demolished and recycled as can be, but things that are, there's lead paint, it's an old building, much of it will have to go to the dump.
Just to say, I think by salvage works, Sam meant deconstruction works.
Deconstruction works, thank you, sorry.
Who I need to contact very soon, but we have not entered into any salvage contract with them yet, but that is our intention.
Yeah, we did the same thing at the previous project with the building that was demolished there.
Okay, I have some questions about the lighting that you brought up, the new lighting and kind of the
Please.
existing lighting. Is that lighting going to be on all the time or is it time limited?
It will be time limited in the sense that it will be on when it's nighttime. So it will be on a solar clock. It won't be on during the day because we don't want to use too much electricity. This question came up previously, and we've talked about motion sensor lighting in the past on other projects. I find that that's actually more distracting because if you're a neighbor and the light clicks on and off, it can be more distracting. So a basic level is typically what we do on all of our projects because we find that's the least objectionable. Furthermore, the photometry shows that the full cutoff lights do not intrude any light onto the adjacent properties. So I think we're in compliance with sort of good standards here with the photometry, but if you have specific questions about the site light, I can talk in more detail if you want.
Please do.
Yeah. So what specifically are you
That's,
concerned about?
tell us about I'd like to see on the plan,
Yeah.
kind of what that looks like.
Sure.
and How high on the building is it?
Yeah.
That sort of
So
thing.
I think if you go scroll down, and Paul, step in please if I misspeak, but we have one plan that shows the site lighting and another plan that shows the different cut sheets. And while we're pulling it up, I'll just talk about the strategy. We basically have 3 layers of light. And so the tallest lights are the parking lot lights. I think they're called PGB once we get to the, the LP4RB. Those are basically parking lot lights. They're 16 feet, 20 feet? I can't remember the exact height. Anyway, they're tall lights. They cast a good amount of light onto the parking lot. They are general illumination for safety at the lot. We have these PGB lights, which are a shorter light, more pedestrian oriented. Those occur at key intersections as well as along the rear pathways in order to light those pedestrian areas. Furthermore, we have the Bs, which stand for bollard lights. Those are shorter 42-inch lights. They're closer together, they don't cast as much light, but they serve to further illuminate different sidewalk areas. What you don't see on this is that there are some additional canopy lights, both at the front porch and the rear porch, which create some additional light at those entrances. But that's the essential basic lighting strategy. And if you look at the photometry plan, you can see these cascading rings that go around each light. Those kind of give you that gradation and light illumination levels that sort of decrease as you go outside of it. And the numbers underlying there tell you the foot candles, which is a basic measure of illumination.
Right, but these new lights that you are proposing or that you want us to make a condition,
Yes.
They're not on this.
They're not on this plan, and we got this feedback on Friday. I haven't had time to change the site plan, and so I'm asking for that flexibility that we work with Brian after you've voted to, as a condition of approval, that we supplement this lighting plan.
Could I add a couple things to that?
Please do, Paul.
So just to elaborate a little bit more, so we have we'll start again from the parking lot. The light poles are the LP. RB means raised base. So we have those bases a little bit higher because, we want to protect the pole itself from cars. These cars will park and they may overhang. So on our detail sheet, L3.1, we show a ground base and a raised base. And so if it says GB, like the pedestrian lights that are the P lights along the walkway, those are lower in height, more at a pedestrian scale, and I think they are about 12 feet high. The parking lot lights are about 15 feet high, and then the bollard lights are really low. They're about 3 feet high. So you can see those circles that Sam mentioned, get smaller when we get closer to the ground level. I do want to say we are over a little bit on photometry, and we're talking tenths along the not along the north property line at all, but along the south property line, because we are still using the pedestrian scale light, and that light doesn't have it's not like the shoebox light where we can put a house shield behind it, right? So we have an entry to the dog run area there, and we have one light that's closer to, I don't know if you can pan up a little bit so we can see that, but that light itself is getting us over a little bit. And if we do add the 3 lights that we're talking about on the north side of the building that are wall packs, we will be slightly over. It'll be tenths again over on, but if that's something the abutters, concerned about and would like to see added, that's something I guess that is in preference to both parties, the abutter as well as our site. But I just want to mention we would be over a little bit in terms of our photometric levels. We're not talking foot candles here. We're talking tenths of a foot candle that we would be over across that property line.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
During demolition and construction, you're gonna have heavy equipment moving things around.
Yes.
Have you coordinated with the neighbors, the inconveniences and the scheduling so that they're not inconvenienced and any more than
I
necessary?
don't think
for
that there will be any inconvenience in terms of the heavy equipment. We'll be storing stuff on site. We don't have planned any off-site improvements or laydown areas, and so all construction activity will happen on the site.
Okay.
And in terms of access, there will be equipment that will need to come in and out of the site, but I don't suspect that traffic will be so significant that it will impact traffic patterns.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of notification to the neighborhood, though, we do have a clear path of conversation with the board at the condos, and we can certainly share the construction schedule once it has evolved.
Just your light that's going off the property on the south side of the property, that's mostly due to the your LP raised bed lights.
Yes.
And geez, if you stuck a little island in there in that 11 foot, you could put the light out in the island, and that would probably take care of most of that, getting the lights off the property line.
It would also bring us into compliance with the parking standards. Yeah.
Just a thought.
I see where you're going. No,
Just a thought.
it's a reasonable suggestion. I still can't see the bottom of our page. Can you zoom out a little bit on this? There you go. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and those aren't as concerning. They're really just like a tenth over or so there. But like the one light that does bring levels higher is the pedestrian light. You can see that's off to the left at the entrance. We had one light we felt was important at the entry to the small pet run area. So that's the one that I see that brings us over. And it's harder to put like a house shield on that pedestrian scale light. But so that's the one I was discussing. We do have house shields, and that's what the HS is. On those two lights that are at the bottom, you can see that's why it's LP4HS for house shield, and then the raised base, RB. So.
Right, I was just looking at the numbers here, right on the back side of the parking lot, going over the property line, you're up to 0.2. Right near where that street light is.
Nora, I think your colleague on Zoom has
Oh,
a question.
Yes, I am, please. There's no little hand thing, so,
I saw you.
oh, thank you so much. Thanks, Bob. I'm looking at your plan C401. I'm trying to figure out where the entrance would be if you had to have emergency services. It looks like roads, but it's just a bunch of little dots. I'm not really sure what it is. For C401.
Could you pull that up for me?
Yeah, it's going to be up in the application, no other way. Yeah.
It's probably the snow area.
No, that's the landscape. Keep going. Oh,
Or
that's 302.
It's really kind of bright from this point.
Is it that one?
Probably going across
Just
the
some
road.
green head.
Oh, is she looking at the EPSC plan?
maybe?
I'm
Yeah,
looking
keep
at
going.
This page
Yeah.
13.
Catherine, do you know which page it is in the
Page
document?
it's about.
All I have is the plan. Right
Oh,
here.
you have it on paper,
Bottom
right?
says C401.
Which one is that?
Thanks.
Is that it right there?
Is this plan? Is it this plan you're talking about?
No, there's no green.
It's all
Well,
green?
it could be the same thing, but mine doesn't have color.
First black and white.
That's it, that's the one, okay.
That's it.
If you look at,
So are you talking about the shaded area next to the dumpster
Yes.
enclosure?
where the parking lot is, there seems to be another shaded entrance above that, and this curves around the parking lot. Is that a road that can be used in case of emergency services? I mean, how do they get in there?
No, you're talking about the pedestrian walk.
Okay, so where is the entrance if you have to have emergency services, fire or otherwise?
That would be the main entrance. So the main entrance is a two-way entrance. So if you needed to have emergency services enter into the parking lot, it would go through them into the main entrance of the parking lot.
Where is that?
That is to the south.
Right where the cursor is there, the gray driveway intersects with Royal Road.
Okay. So that gray area just goes into the parking lot?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so what about the building that's going to be opposite the parking lot? How do they get in for that emergency service?
Building opposite, that's the
The building is the building that's above that you want to build,
Yes.
above that parking lot. Where is the entrance for that for emergency services?
So for they are ADA accessible spaces, right? Kind of where the cursor is right now. We're next to the existing walkway. So if a ambulance needed to get a stretcher or any other equipment through that would be an ADA accessible space. So they would use that walkway from from the parking lot. You could also, the walkway going to Royal Road is also an accessible route as well.
So that's the front door, and that's where firefighters or emergency personnel would respond. The fire alarm panel would be in that vestibule, as well as any other sprinkler equipment. The fire department connection would also occur there in case the fire truck needed to connect to the building.
And and I'll just kind of add one of the reasons why we set the building at, in the location that it was is to maintain an accessible route from Royal Road to here, do the elevation change, and not have a steep slope. If we were to bring that closer to the building, elevation change, and you would have a very steep ramp.
Okay, and I mean, before, originally there was a bus stop location with the older building you're going to demolish. Is that bus stop location going to remain, or is there going to be one? Because a lot of the people use, the mover. So I was wondering if that would be just something that you would put in later, or do you know where it's going to go, or you have to talk to the mover?
There's no bus stop.
Yeah, it's not active right now, so thank you, Dick.
Right.
Yeah, we would be interested in seeing if the mover would resume service.
That would be great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
So do you have a generator, a backup, in case you lose power?
We do not have a backup generator. If we were to lose power, we would lose power like everyone else.
Generally, backup generators in residential neighborhoods are kind of, because, if this is the only facility that has a generator, it's going to produce a lot of noise. Just as a kind of food for thought.
Just
have the generator.
They can
Noisy.
be. Not always, but they can be, to Andrew's point. Yes.
Back to the lighting again. I started taking a closer look at this. Right where the entrance to the property is, it seems as if you're spilling out even more out onto the road and probably across the road there.
Paul, I think we do have some lighting that goes onto the road, but I don't believe it goes all the way across the street.
Well, you stop at 0.5, and usually that light has a habit.
I don't disagree with you. I think more light on the street is not necessarily a problem in my mind, but I understand what you're saying. I think additional lighting at the entrance to a parking lot is frankly good design. So I don't see it as an issue, but I understand it. I guess I'm not sure, do you have a question or a concern?
It's your drawing stops at a 0.5, and other places it goes to 0 and 0.1. It doesn't it doesn't show the extent that it might go across the road.
I understand your question,
That's-
and without
That's my
updating
concern.
the photometry to extend further, I don't know I can answer.
Yeah, I mean,
that
it's
question.
just
We can, I mean, knowing that we're gonna add 3 wall packs and maybe some lighting along the stone dust path that's in the back that was suggested at the beginning of the presentation, we're happy to provide a plan and zoom out a little bit or pan this over so that we can show that we can get to 0, before it gets to the abutting lot across the street.
that'd be great.
This
Go
is
ahead,
a
Tom.
this is a pretty picky question, but I can't help
That's all right,
myself but ask. On one of your plans, the existing conditions and site preparation plan, where it talks about removing some trees and pruning others, there's some trees that are totally off of your parcel and they're labeled saying provide selective pruning. Now, are the labels of the trees just not accurate and some of the branches actually overhang your property, or do you
Certain
make an
branches
agreement with-
overhang the property, and as needed, we will be pruning those branches in
Okay.
order to comply, as is our right.
Right. Okay.
Anybody else?
A lot of acorns fall on those tennis courts. I don't know if you had some agreement with Morningside. Pickleball courts, I should say.
Any more questions from the board at this time? Okay, so we can open up to the interested parties. So I want to make clear that there will be no back and forth between the interested party and the applicants. You can address your issues and concerns to us. We'll take note. We're probably going to let most of you talk before we address those issues and concerns, because I expect some of them will be duplicative. Yes, Brian.
I just want to clarify that people who testify are members of the public, but it's a determination of the board that will happen probably in deliberative session, whether they're interested parties or not.
Okay. So when you get up, please state your name, come up to the microphone, and tell us your issues. And if you have not taken the oath, we're going to have to do that. It's behind you. So.
Hi, I'm Michael Hertz. I live at 52 Morningside. I've been there about 20 years. I'm also one of the directors and also the current president of the Morningside Commons Association. The building that's being replaced is the one that's been closed, as the board well knows, for almost 2 years because of the tragic event that occurred there. That building had a capacity of about 30 maximum occupancy. And so the new building is going up to 40, which is a 33% increase. We're also going from what looked like kind of an old farmhouse house to a modern looking large structure, which has a much more business-like appearance to it. And I think it makes it incompatible with the area and also alters the character of the area as well. I'm also concerned about the pedestrian access and circulation. I think discussions we've had, some of the residents probably will have cars and a number of them will not. And so there's going to be a large increase of people compared to what it is now, obviously. But even compared to what it was before, there's going to be more people coming up and down that road, which is rather narrow and I consider dangerous, especially at night. People coming from town and turning, making that right turn, and people walking out who are walking up the road there. I would create a danger of accidents there, and I think obviously the more pedestrians, more people living there, the more pedestrians we're going to have, and the more likelihood of those kinds of incidents. And I think also increasing from 30 to 40 residents increases the likelihood of interpersonal conflicts between those people. By definition, as they talked about, these people really don't want to be living there. They want to be moving on to places of their own, and obviously only a fraction of them will be able to do that, and frustrations are likely to arise, and the more people, I think, the more likelihood we have of interpersonal discord. That would be my main objection now to the size, and I would rather see it continue the way it was with about 30 residents rather than going to this large increase to 40. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Dick DeGray, resident of Morningside, on the board. I heard several things here that I was somewhat concerned about and that I would like to make a comment. First, about the setback. Morningside, the residents, would prefer that the building is further off the street than closer to the street. We prefer as large a buffer as we can have. And so if that can go back, to the original design that was presented, that would be much more amenable. The lighting, which I was also concerned about, given the past practice of the facility before the unfortunate incident, darkness is not our friend at Morningside. And that's a key ingredient to have as much lighting down there at that facility as we possibly can. I thought, I don't have glasses on here this evening, but with the lighting drawing, I thought that there was lighting at the entrance, actually on the southern side of the beginning of the driveway. And I don't think I don't know if I saw a light there. And I had also asked at a previous meeting, before we met with Sam on Friday, Peter and Miss Bennett and John made a presentation to us at Morningside, and I talked about lighting all along the front side of the property line. And one of the major problems that we have, and it's not the shelter's fault, is that that's a dark area. There's a street light actually before the property, near the front, the first driveway in phase one, as you come up Royal Road, and then the next street light is past the property. So that is somewhat of a dark area and a huge concern. And we have a huge concern of going by past practice. There was heavy drug activity. There was a lot of car theft going on. There was noise, which Michael alluded to in terms of increasing the facility to 40. We would certainly prefer 30. And once the unfortunate incident happened, all that activity stopped at Morningside. Now, I can't stand here and tell you it was the people at the shelter doing that, but once the activity stopped, one would make an assumption that it was brought on either by residents there or people going to the shelter to visit people. The other thing I heard about the matching up with the fence, which we did talk about, I would hope that that's a wood fence that continues on from the fence that we put up several years ago, that match in material and not have a screen fence. What they do around, if there's fencing, I wasn't sure if that fencing is gonna go all the way around the backside of the property. If that wanted to be screen fence, I'm certainly fine with that. But the fence that abuts the property in phase one, we would want that to be the same material as they have agreed to. Our neighborhood is elderly. We're talking about the median age, and I'm, not that I'm the youngest, but we're up there in age. We're in the high 60s for a median age. And with all due respect to the leadership at the shelter, it was shabbily run before. And all we have is promises that it won't be like that again. But this is our only one bite at the apple, because once it's in, it's in. And we don't want to have, just like they do, we don't want to have what was happening before because of poor management. Now, we have promises from them that this is not going to happen. But you can't make a promise like that, because some of the clientele that you're dealing with are at-risk residents, hoping to get cured of whether it's alcohol or substance abuse, and we want that to happen. But we also want our neighborhood, which was gravely impacted, and you're talking about 166 building owners. that were affected by what was going on in this property. And so there's a huge concern here to make sure that we get this right, that we have adequate lighting, that we have proper safeguards in. I raised the issue about parking, that there are way too many parking places. Since I'm not up on the regulations, I believe that when I talked to Brian and or John, that we use regulations for parking that we would use for a motel, and that's why this parking area is so big. I understand them not wanting to be undersized, but I think that this is way oversized. And I would hope that although they said they could relinquish 1 or 2 spots, I would hope it would be relinquished by more. 15 would be a nice optimum number. I believe the number of staff that they're gonna have 24/7 is 2, we were told. And then different staff people there during the day. Prior residents of that property, there were very few people that had owned automobiles that were there. There were guests there. I don't know if you have jurisdiction over hours of operation. And the reason I'm saying some of this stuff is I want to get it on the record, is that the shelter will have a curfew of 8 o'clock, which is fine with us at Morningside. I'm not sure what time they have as an opening, but 8 o'clock is really fine with us. Again, because of prior activities there. So if we could do anything to downsize the parking lot, that would be great. And that lighting, if there could be a little bit more lighting from the northern side of the property on the street level, just to illuminate, even if it's only a 3-foot light, just so people in phase 4, which looks over at that, certainly can see if there's anything going on, and if they need to call the police, they do. I don't know if cameras are part of the jurisdiction of the DRB. Certainly, the shelter has talked about having cameras there. That's a huge concern of ours, and making sure that there are ample cameras, some pointing over towards the property line of Morningside, phase 4 and phase 1. Phase 1 is the one that abuts right next to the backside of the building. So I would hope that you would consider downsizing this project to 30. I don't think that people realize the enormity of the size of this building. Once it gets in there, it's gonna be something totally different that we're looking at compared to what's there right now. And I think it's gonna be a huge shock to the residents of Morningside Shelter, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Folks, if we can all just keep quiet and just be respectful of each other's and not editorialize. As far as lighting, Dick was asking for more light on the street, and there's concern about it exceeding the amount of light that's allowed per acre. But there is an exemption for public street lighting, and in effect, some of that street, the lighting Dick is proposing along the front of the building would illuminate that street. And I suggest to the board that you just make a finding that that's public street lighting and that it's not part of the maximum lumen calculation per acre.
Okay.
That would allow the type of lighting that the neighbors are wanting and the groundwork is wanting, and stay within the regulations.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Gervin. I'm also a director on the board at Morningside Commons. I was the president of the board when the tragedy happened in the past, and I can tell you that we had a traumatized community. Our community is still traumatized. And I would like to not see this variance be allowed because I understand the reason for it, sure. You'd like to have 40 people, 4 to a room. That's smashing a lot of people into one room. I would very much like to see this be limited to 30 people. I feel like that's much more doable for integrating people into our community. Exactly what Dick said, we have had no more cars being gotten into, we've had no more peeking in windows. So, you know, maybe this is going to be run differently, and I hope so. And I really believe, Libby, and I really believe that that's their purpose and their intention. But it's still a very it's a community. Morningside is a community. This is a lockdown facility. So we are trying very much to understand and accept that these folks need a place to live, but we also want to respect our well-being and where we live. You're talking about having a dog park. Well, in the past, when there were dogs there, they weren't controlled, they weren't managed in any way. They were our dogs. We have a leash law at Morningside. You can't let your dog run out the door. You have to walk it on a leash. And in the past, and I have a dog, I've always had a dog. When I walked my dog down Royal Road, there'd be dogs running out from the shelter area out to the road. Big dogs, German Shepherds. So I want to make sure that it's understood that has to be respected, that we have different rules. And 40 people, in my mind, is way too many. It's going to be just a crash and burn as far as I can see. And as far as lighting goes, yeah, we need lighting, but my concern is also the people who live in the building right opposite the road. Their windows are like 15 feet off the road, so they're just going to get very much illuminated. So it's going to have to be a balance. So my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
An opportunity.
Hi, Clarence Fang, 131 Morningside Commons.
I'm sorry, what's your name?
First name Clarence, last name Fang, spelled F like in Frank, E-N-G. And we actually live in phase 4, right across Royal Road from the shelter. I can tell you there is one street light. It's right about at the property line separating phase 1 from the Morningside shelter. So some of the comments I'm going to make are going to resonate with some things that I've heard today, maybe differ a little bit. Regarding parking, I've looked at the application they've made regarding parking and traffic, and all I can say is that the data that it's based on appears to make any kind of evaluation invalid. I'll tell you why. It's based on an assisted living facility in Provo, Utah. Now, people in an assisted living facility typically don't work. They typically don't drive. Now, they may or may not walk, but some people in an assisted living facility, I think we all know, can have problems with that as well. Are those the kinds of folks that will be at the Morningside shelter? We don't know. However, I'm going to guess that some of them will have vehicles. Many of them will be able to walk. Some of them will be employed. That doesn't speak to having their valuation hold water, in my opinion. Now, something they've mentioned about parking is that they have more spaces than they're supposed to, but they are supposed to have 40 people there. If more than about a third of those individuals have a vehicle, then the staff are going to run out of parking spaces at some point during the day, probably. Where are those staff people going to park in case that there's an overflow? There really isn't any other parking along Royal Road, except in front of the tennis courts. So I'm not advocating they increase the parking spaces. That's for sure. However, I do think that perhaps maybe bears some consideration about just how many people you should have in that structure. Regarding the landscape plan, I appreciate Groundworks' willingness to be flexible about this, but I noticed that on the foliage plan, they're not respecting the tree line at Royal Road. They're actually removing it because they're removing the trees along Royal Road. What tree line they are putting in place is going to be set further back. It's 2 honey locusts set in front of the parking lot about 30 feet away from Royal Road. What's in front of Royal Road is basically like some hydrangeas or something like that. I think that could be more effective if there were a screen of smaller height trees closer to Royal Road, as there is an evergreen tree near Royal Road now. If you had a line of those, I think that would be great. And then regarding lighting, I've heard several comments regarding lighting, and you've noted that there's these 15-foot light poles that are going to be in the parking lot, and there is also one more at the driveway itself. That's 5 in total, 15 feet high. Based on my guess, the height of that lamp is going to be above floor level for somebody standing on the top floor of the condo across Royal Road. And that's partly because of a difference in ground height at the shelter versus those of us living in phase 4. I'll also say that tall lights are going to cast deep shadows under a canopy of trees. Lower lights cast longer shadows, the better to be able to observe anything that's on feet. So I would suggest perhaps lower lights for the parking lot, and certainly for the driveway entrance, where I think actually 2 of the bollard type lights that they've specified flanking the driveway would make an effective marker for the boundaries of the drive without being so disruptive to basically our view. I mean, we're going to be looking at parking lot lights, which are really, is that a residential kind of a thing to be looking at? I think not. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have a lady from Wyndham Windsor, like to speak.
Okay, we'll take the people that are in line here, and then we'll hear them.
Hello, board. My name is Richard. Ritchie, R-I-C-C-I is my last name. I live at 12 Morningside, and I've been a resident there for a little over 23 years.
It should catch you, don't have to bend over.
Oh, I'm sure anyway. Anyway, so I have 2 questions. Number 1 was, last week, Groundworks mentioned that some of the residents coming in are going to be detoxing off of alcohol, drugs, or whatever it could be. And earlier they said, well, they're not going to have anybody come in that's detoxing. Then the other issue is, and I think everybody really here is in agreement, is the security, what's going to be any kind of security. And last week I asked, is there going to be any kind of security officers, anybody in place to protect the people that work there, people like us that live there, obviously? And they said no. So I thought that was completely ridiculous, thinking that, of course, what happened. So I asked the question, do you think that the young lady that was murdered may have had a better chance of living if there was a security officer there at the time? And the shoulders kind of shrugged, saying, who's to say? And it was just kind of left at that. My opinion, if I was working there, I certainly would want a security officer, somebody to protect me. The way it's standing now is like there's nothing. It's going to be a free-for-all. I live directly, probably 40 feet from the back where the new building's going to be built, or hopefully not built. I don't want it built. But anyway, what I decided to do after I heard there wasn't going to be any security is I asked the tenants in phase 1 what they thought about having security on the premises for the Groundworks, if they'd be interested in signing a petition. So I have some signatures here from just phase 1. That's all I have time to get for this one. So I was wondering if I can give them to you folks. Sure. Okay. for you and,
he's the record keeper.
well, anyway, so, I mean, to me, it seems like the number one issue, parking, lights, all that other stuff, great, fantastic. But where's the security?
Okay.
Where's our peace of mind? Where are we, when we walk at night with our dogs, or my wife, or somebody's daughter, how do we know it's secure? How do we know? So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Somebody online wants to speak?
Let's make sure they all took the new input online.
Yes.
Because some came after we.
Oh, they didn't, okay, thank you. Anybody online want to make a statement?
I'd like to.
Did you take the oath, please?
I did take the oath earlier. Would you like me to take it again?
Nope, that's fine, thank you. Your name?
Well, Elizabeth Bridgewater, and I'm the executive director of the Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust.
Okay.
I want to start by saying I trust the board in their thoughtful deliberation on the merits of this proposal. I'm hearing a lot of respectful comments from the residents, and also hearing that Groundworks and their architectural team is open to hearing and incorporating some of those comments into the design. So I want to register my support for the project in general, and also for increasing the number of opportunities for folks to stay there from 30 to 40. A high barrier shelter is a critical resource in the housing system. It gives folks the opportunity to have a stable and predictable place to sleep at night, access services, and address some of the barriers that they may have to accessing permanent housing. It's also an opportunity to build community. I know some folks have expressed concerns about what the quality of the community will be. There's also opportunity for positive community building in settings like this. And I know that Groundworks is committed to those activities that will build community. Since the shelter was taken offline, we've had this glaring gap in the housing system, and it's at a time when the unsheltered population is rising. John mentioned that there were 338 folks in the point in time count in 2024. And before the pandemic, it was about hovering between 112 and 114. So that is a significant increase in the unsheltered population in our community. And this project is being considered at a time when the state-run motel program is winding down. So we absolutely need a safe and decent place for folks to go and stabilize. The design team that Groundworks is working with designed 54 Main Street, and other than the parking issues that they brought up themselves, I think it's a very thoughtful design, and I can see some of the thoughtfulness in this design as well. They've got a lot of experience in designing for this purpose. And so I just want to conclude by saying I'm excited by this project. I think it's going to fill a critical need in the community. And I hope that through this process, some of the resident concerns can be addressed so that this project can move forward with 40 beds. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Sandy Panucci, and I live at 95 Morningside Commons. I appreciate that you're trying to integrate your facility into our neighborhood. And I know that the orange color is recognizable as being, Groundworks, but to me, it says it's institutional. It's not, it doesn't feel like it fits into our community. It looks like an institutional building to me with that. And I don't want to reiterate what everybody else said, but that kind of bothers me. I would love to see you do a more neutral color, something that didn't stand out and announce itself as we're a shelter.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any hands up? Okay, you wanna say something else, Mr.
Yes,
McGray?
I'm only standing because of Ms. Bridgewater's comment. And the collaboration between the Groundworks and Wyndham Housing Trust does not have a great track record. If you look at Dalem Chalet and you look at Great River up on Putney Road, they are two of the leading places for police calls in a presentation to the select board about a month and a half ago. And so when I hear someone speaking about more housing, there's a huge safety concern that we have. And the proof is in the records of the police calls that end up going to Great River and end up going to Dalem Chalet. And we don't want that to happen down at Morningside. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm Bob Walker. I live on Morningside, 136. I'm the closest resident to Groundworks. In the past, it's been a nightmare. We don't get any sleep at night. And I'll tell you, one of the problems, and it hasn't been brought up here, is visitors. There are some pretty low-life visitors that come, and they don't hesitate to have loud mufflers. They don't hesitate to drive around at midnight, and we don't get any sleep. So I would like noise. In the application, it said noise residential. Well, I don't know what that means, but when you got 40 people running around with their friends, you're gonna have noise. So I think that's something that should be considered.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Does the board have any other questions? Go ahead, Catherine.
Sorry, I was muted for a minute. It was mentioned earlier in the beginning of the meeting about the destruction of the existing building. I'm curious to know what type of time frame it would be for, because there's going to be having trucks going in and out, correct, to take out salvage and stuff. So do you have a kind of time frame as far as what time during the day or when it's going to stop?
For construction, you mean?
For the deconstruction, the demolition of the existing building.
Okay, can you address Catherine? You give us a timeline on demolition and construction.
So the duration of construction is approximately 10 months from start to finish. In terms of the demolition itself, I think that will happen pretty quickly. That's probably a day or two, though honestly that's a construction management question that I don't know the precise answer to. In terms of, so to your question, Catherine, in terms of how long the demolition would take place, is that really the core of your question?
Yes.
Yeah, I think once the site work, once the site contractor is mobilized and they're on site and they're pushing it over, it's going to come down pretty quickly. So I don't think that this is a long duration of deconstruction, to answer your question.
Okay.
But construction will 10 months or so?
10 months is what we've currently got slated,
Okay.
plus or minus. And so
And assuming you get a pretty good approval, or?
Oh, in terms of start date?
Yes.
What are we thinking right now?
Mobilizing in May.
Yes. That's
May?
the plan is May, assuming
Okay.
we get your approval.
Thank you. So is there any comments that you'd like to kind of summarize in response to the
I've been taking some
participants?
notes and I have, I can speak to a few of the questions. In terms of Michael's concern about the character of the neighborhood being addressed with the design,
Yep.
I certainly understand his perspective, and I understand different people's desire for a different aesthetic, perhaps, or that our proposed design doesn't quite meet their expectations. I think this is certainly something that I could speak to in terms of Sandy. Sorry, I didn't get your last name. Your comment about the color of the trellis. I would just state that the DRB does not actually have purview over color. And so we are simply reviewing the design as it is. So you're seeing what we intend to do, but that is not actually subject to review by the DRB. In terms of the character of the neighborhood and the building itself, I do believe it's a modern design that's intentional on our part, but I do think the gabled roof form as well as other siding elements bring it into compliance and into respect with the neighborhood. In terms of the site lighting, I think we've discussed that extensively, and I do believe that we can come back provided you agree to a condition of approval with a site plan that adds additional illumination to address many of the concerns that the residents have. I agree with Dick that darkness is not our friend at this project, and to that end, I think we can manage that. In terms of cameras, we are working on a security plan with the cameras. I don't think that's part of this application, but I just want to mention that is part of the plan. To Clarence's concern about the site lighting intruding into the condos across the street, I don't think that is, I understand your concern, but I don't think that will actually happen. I think the lights are shielded such that you will not have light intruding into your property. So I understand the height and your concern about that, but based on the photometry, I do not believe that will actually come to pass. I would add, though, that one of the conditions of approval that we recommended at the beginning was that we would add some additional plantings in front of the parking lot in order to further screen that. So I think that speaks a little bit to your comment as well. So in terms of the residential question, this is a residential building. People are going to be living here. We're not changing the use of the current approved use, and so I understand people's comments about the building perhaps not feeling residential to them. However, I design lots of apartment buildings that have parking lots. Those are all still people's homes, and those are residential in their character. So this may not be a single family home, but I do believe a parking lot with a building can be residential. We may be arguing about semantics, but I just wanted to push back a little bit about that.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I think Sam covered a lot. Just a brief comment on color. While Groundworks would reserve the right to decide what color the building would be, I'll say within Groundworks, we don't have a particularly strong opinion about the color. So maybe if the condo board, because I don't necessarily want to field 165 different opinions, but if the condo board is willing to make a recommendation on color, we would be happy to receive it. In terms of, there's some comments on the waiver on square footage. We started this design process with the building at 4,000 square feet and a similar floor plan. We identified the waiver to go up to 10% more. We had a design at that level, and then someone to the design team's chagrin, we said, that costs a little more than is feasible, so we backed out. So that's to say, if we were not granted the waiver to go up past 4,000, we would have the same building with the same occupancy, and it would be smaller and less amenable to the occupants.
Okay.
Go
ahead.
I'm assuming that any dogs that might have come off of the property before, where I assume that you folks are running under the same leash law that that we all kind of are.
Yeah, I assume we're subject to town of Brattleboro leash law. I would agree with that.
Okay, and do I remember hearing that you're going to have some sort of a curfew there, or how is that gonna go as far as people coming and going into the evening, or how is?
Yeah, so the curfew for the program would be 8 p.m. And that would
be for not only residents, but also people that are visiting or coming or going, or?
We want to have visitation after 8 p.m. for
Okay.
guests. So curfew would be 8 p.m. I mean, I will say if someone has employment or some other good cause to come later, then we want to support them in their employment. That's going to be a part of their housing sustainability. So we would have appropriate exceptions on it. But in general, the curfew for the program would be 8 p.m.
Now, that being said, I lived across the street from when the Women's Phoenix House was, and they were wonderful neighbors. Everything worked out just fine. The only problem that we ever had was somebody, the Green Mountain Transport would come and pick up people at 5:30 in the morning, and they felt the need to back up their driveway with their backup signals on, going beep, 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 beep.
I don't think they have a choice.
Well, I know, but I mean, but
Backup
that's,
beeps are-
it's, I mean, but that, in my mind, that would, that's kind of part of the problem with residential nuisance ordinances, I would assume. We have nuisance ordinances, and noise is one of the things that is front and center on that. And is there anything, any sort of I don't know.
Well, there's decibels and all that, but I think, you know, the idea that whoever's collecting the trash comes at 5 in the morning and backs into the driveway, that's where, you know,
I mean,
pretty disruptive.
Yeah, I mean, that's the type of thing. Have you considered the disruption to the neighborhood because of your, trash, or somebody, Green Mountain Transport coming to pick people up, or anything along those lines?
I'm not totally sure what the occasion for Green Mountain Transport would be. I would say this being a residence, any vehicle traffic would be consistent with other vehicle traffic serving other residences in the area. So I guess I can't remember off the top of my head what the trash services in Morningside condos. But assuming that they have trash collection, that would also present a similar nuisance.
Mm-hmm. If anything, we want to get the same vendor so that we have the same trash truck visits our site as visits the condo board. So I think there are ways to streamline that.
So somebody, when somebody would have a night job or something that they need transport to, that they'd get transported like on a regular vehicle, a regular car, or would you contract with a transport company for that?
The people we were hoping to shelter, I hope that either prior to coming there or while there, people find means of employment that matches the transportation resources that are available to them. So if they have a car and they can get a job up on Putney Road, great. If they need to take the bus, then they should have jobs that match that schedule. We, in general, want to be able to provide personal transportation for people to jobs. So we might not do that occasionally, but I mean, it's
nice to be good neighbors, that's
Yeah.
all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, to that bigger point, we would want to say in close communication with any abutters just on a one-on-one basis, but also with the condo board or property management, that if there's some sort of noise complaint from whatever it may be it individuals or just that we have that trash service that comes at 4 a.m., we want to hear about it and see if we could address it.
Dick, you've already been up twice.
Well, I know, but this is an issue that we dealt with the bus. And I thank Mike for bringing it up. We had a bus coming every morning at 6 o'clock, sitting in front of the shelter idling, waiting for potential riders. And once the unfortunate incident happened and the facility was closed, the bus kept coming every day and would sit there for 15 to 20 minutes. Until finally I made a call. I'm not sure if I called Mr. Elwell. I think what I did, I was rolling that tape back about who I called. Then I called the assistant town manager, and I also called the mover people to get that stopped. But it wasn't the easiest thing in the world to have the bus not come and sit. And I said, you know, Royal Road is a public road, and we do have an idling law in Brattleboro, which they were in violation of. But there's also a turnaround. I don't know how many of you ever have driven up to Royal Road. Maybe you made a site visit up there. But there's a nice turnaround area, and I actually asked the bus driver, I said, can you go up there and park? Because he said, I'm on a certain schedule. And I says, well, go sit up at the end of the driveway up by the cemetery. That way you won't be infringing upon the neighbors right across the street. And he wouldn't do that. So after 3 phone calls, the bus stopped coming. So hopefully, and we raised this with John and people behind me, and certainly they're willing to work with us, but I'm glad we're having a discussion about noise intrusion. Thank you. I don't want to wear you out here.
Yes, you've been there. Please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dave Goodhue.
Come up to the microphone, please.
Yes. My name is David Goodhue. Been a resident at Morningside for 2 years. I personally want to say I support any effort to help the homeless crisis here in Vermont and all over the country. But in my opinion, it has to be done here, and in this case, there have to be safety and security concerns to prevent or minimize the possibility of what happened before from happening again. The additional fencing, I personally support, not chain link fencing, but fencing in back there up to where it meets a natural barrier. Security background checks, we have already discussed and would say there should be specific limits on if they have a certain number of convictions, that they not be allowed there, and that those criteria be laid out in advance. Wanding and security devices haven't been discussed. A simple, something that would have prevented what happened there before is a simple security guard with a wand that would have prevented the woman from coming in with her weapon, which I understand was there for 3 days. So that one additional security could have prevented that last terrible incident from occurring. 24-hour security, I think that was mentioned. We would ask for that. I've heard previous that there was essentially a tent city in the woods behind the previous structure, and that be absolutely prohibited, and that there be absolutely prohibited any illegal drug use on the premises. This, we believe, protects the property owners, protects this elderly population, this is on both sides of the fence, disabled people, and the children who use our facilities regularly. And that's our primary concerns. And thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone else have anything to say? Any more questions?
I think I have a quick follow-up.
Go ahead, Tim.
Just based on some testimony and some, it really wasn't on my radar walking into the meeting, but the idea of this curfew, can you just tell me how that's enforced historically, or
Yeah.
what that actually means in your view of
it would-
curfew?
Violations, complying with the curfew would be a condition of continuing to stay. So obviously, it's 8 p.m. and someone's not there, we're not gonna like go look for them. But say they show up at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m., depending on the circumstances, it may be the case that we say, okay, you can come in, but our program coordinator is gonna talk with you tomorrow, and from there, gain insight into it. It might be that their car broke down, and we have every reason to believe that's true, and we might say, okay, we're gonna note this. We hope that doesn't happen again. Or it could be this is the second or third time someone hasn't made curfew, and unfortunately, because we do have these expectations, it could result in discharge from the program. So that's how we would address it, is mainly some discretion to understand the circumstances, but ultimately it's a condition of ongoing staying in the program.
And that's pretty much how you've handled it in the past and plan to continue handling it?
I would say this is a much more robust approach to curfews than we had in the shelter operations there prior. It is similar to how we are now approaching curfews at the drop-in or at the South Main Street shelter.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So can I have a motion for us to go into deliberative session?
I'll motion that we go to deliberative session.
And Catherine seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that means the session is closed to the public.